Hello in Hamar. I am sitting in Göteborg in Sweden, and I'm doing this in English because I know that sometimes Norwegians have problems with my dialect. Hopefully, English will work better for you. Most of you usually understand my Swedish, but I was thinking that English might be better. I'm sad I can't be with you today. It looked like a very interesting schedule, but it was not possible. So I promised to record something instead. So uh, here is my recording on the discussion of artificial intelligence, ethics, copyright, etc. I will share my screen. There we go. And just some short notes on who I am. I guess some of you already know me. I don't know who is in the audience, but anyhow, I have a background in computer science. That's what I was studying from the beginning. And then one could say that everything started when I was 11 years old and I got my first electric guitar from my mom. And when I was 12 years old, I got a VIC 20, um, the predecessor of Commodore 64, so one of the earlier computers. So it was kind of set what I was going to do the rest of my life, computers and music, kind of. So I've been following this area, tech, music, and economy, for quite some time. I'm writing for the Swedish music industry on something called musikkbransjen, which is the official news agency, one could say, for the Swedish music industry, financed by the record labels and music publishers, etc. So I've been writing for the music industry since 1999. Actually, one of the first news items I wrote about was the release of Napster. Then you understand how incredibly old I am. But over the years, it's been, well, almost 7,000 articles and analysis and things I've been writing for the music industry. And my specific niche is music, tech, and economy. So the music business and how technology is influencing music. I'm connected to the University of Inland, so that's why I'm invited, I guess. And here in Sweden, I've been connected with the Linnaeus University for many, many years. I'm also teaching at another education called Music Business Developer here in Sweden and at other universities as well. Enough about me. Always when I do a presentation like this, I start with Ada Lovelace, who we usually call the first coder. She was a part of a group of very interesting people. Lord Byron was her father, and Mary Shelley was another one in this group of thinkers. Mary Shelley that wrote Frankenstein, one of the first, if not the first, science fiction novel. And they were thinking a lot about the future. And Ada Lovelace is called the first coder or the first programmer because she created some kind of, well, code that bears resemblance to how we instruct computers today. And in 1842, she wrote about Charles Babbage's analytical engine. That was a thought experiment that Babbage had about if you could do this with physical stuff, then you could create what we today call the computer, or what we call a Turing machine, Alan Turing's, which is now all of this stuff. That is a Turing machine. This was, of course, 100 years earlier, and the technological situation was very different. It would take more than 40 years before humans learn how to fixate music on a physical medium. We couldn't record sound for another 40 years. Electricity wasn't harnessed. The coolest thing was the steam engine. No telephones, no light bulbs, nothing of the technological reality we're living in today had even started to be invented. Nevertheless, they thought about the future and were very foresighted. So in 1842, she wrote about the Charles Babbage, the analytical engine that Charles Babbage had talked about. And she wrote, the analytical engine might act upon other things besides number, were objects found whose mutual fundamental relations could be expressed by those of the abstract science of operations, and which would be also susceptible of adaptations to the action of the operating notation and mechanism of the engine. Supposing, for instance, that the fundamental relations of pitched sounds in the science of harmony and of musical composition were susceptible of such expression and adaptations, the engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent. I always feel it's kind of almost spooky when I read this. It's more than 180 years ago, and the technological reality was totally different. Still, she had the possibility, or she was so smart that she could foresee that if we can create the analytical engine, if the analytical engine could handle other stuff than just numbers, and we could express music in discrete ways, then it should be possible for the analytical engine to also create music. And now, here we are. So this was a picture of the analytical engine, and you can see it has some resemblance to the Turing machine or the modern day computer, but of course there were no electricity at the time, so it was other kinds of components. Let's move forward to fall 2024 and the song Verknallt in einen Talahorn by the artist Butterbro, who entered the German chart, the first fully AI-generated song that got into the German chart. And it was used, Suno was used, and it attracted more than 11 million streams on Spotify. And here you can see that it was also aired on during when it was released here in August. It started to be aired also on radio in Germany. And I thought I should just play a little bit from this track. Verknallt in einen Talahorn. It should be mentioned that this is an earlier Suno model that was being used.
Letzte Woche Kirmes war anders wild. Ich hab mit den Chayas am Autoscooter gechillt. Da hab ich einen Talahorn aus der Ferne erkannt. Mit Seiten auf Null und Vape in der Hand. Er hat ne dicke Schale und wirkt richtig hart. Aber er fragt jeden Kerl, ob er Probleme hat. Ich glaube, ich bin verknallt in einen Talahorn. Mit Louis Gürtel Gucci.
Don't have the time to listen to more, but there are other ethical concerns about this song. It has a racist undertone in it, which is quite surprised, you could say, that it becomes so well streamed and also aired by radio. But nevertheless, it's one example of fully AI generated music getting into the charts. We have another example, Visa dina tuttar, by the artist AI Music Dreams, that became #1 on the Spotify viral top list for Sweden in fall 24. And this song was fully audio-generated through Udio, and I thought we should play a little bit about from that one as well. Visa dina tuttar.
En gång när jag var 15 träffade jag en tjej. Hennes kropp var helt förtjusande och främmande för mig. För under hennes bröst där såg jag något som stack ut. Och när vi kom fram till stranden gav jag av ett tjut. Hon hade ingen handduk, jag som snubbe med ett väck. En blandning mellan bångekåtet, glädje och skräck. När vi kom ut i vattnet kände jag direkt. Jag ville se på hennes pattar så jag ställde mig och skrek. Visa dina tuttar och hoppa upp och ner. Hämta någon kompis så att tuttarna blir fler.
You can hear this is a so-called dansbands låt, the genre dansband. And these are just two examples of songs that have come into the charts. But as you know, as of today, there is an enormous increase in AI-generated tracks being uploaded to streaming platforms. So more than 20,000 tracks are now uploaded each day on average, accounting for roughly 1/5 of all new music releases in the world. And one should mention that this has increased from 10,000 in January, and in April it was 20,000. How will it be in July or in September? We'll see. What is interesting, though, is that this figure does not include the far greater volume of music created using non-generative AI tools. So this is generative AI. But as you have been going through today during this AI day, there's a lot of other tools for mastering synthetic voices, virtual instrument, stem separation, etc. We'll come back to that in a second. This is another form of AI. So one could argue that the majority of music releases already today, in some ways, have been AI-induced or AI-boosted, or AI technology is used in some way. Not necessarily in the creation, but in post-production, etc. Over half of all songwriters in Germany report using some form of AI support, according to GEMA, which is the equivalent of TUNO. And 60% of independent artists globally make use of AI tools in their workflows, according to a survey done by the distributor Dette. So this is not something in the future. It's already here. This is a reality we're living with today and have been living with for some time. And I think it's good to think about that it's only 2 years ago that Heart on My Sleeve was released, which is not generative AI. But 2 years ago, the release of this AI cover of The Weeknd and Drake would kind of kickstarted it all. Suno hadn't been released, Udio hadn't been released, Stable Audio wasn't released, and so on. So it's just 2 years ago. Although it's been a long time, the developing of this has been going on even all the way back to the 50s. So there's been a long development, but things have been moving very fast. And there are some ethical and copyright challenges, and we will focus on them. So one of the first one is about the input. So the training of AI models. Does it fall on the so-called fair use, or is it a type of use that requires licensing from rights holders? So all companies like OpenAI, Udio, Suno, Google, Microsoft, everyone that is working within the AI space promotes that the open web, as they call it, is fair use. And the open web, what they mean by the open web is simply that everything that is not behind the paywall is free to use for training AI models. So basically everything on YouTube, everything that is ad-based, everything on TikTok, and so on, you could use. And they call this concept the open web. So this is one of the absolute biggest questions to answer and decide upon, not just for music, but for humanity in total. When it comes to text, when it comes to images, literature, the history of everything that humanity has created, is it fair use to train models on this? Or should rights holders like authors, photographers, movie producers, record labels, etc., have the possibility to license it? So that's one of the questions. The other question concerns the output. Should rights holders whose music has been used in training also receive a share of revenues from, example, streaming platforms? So the two examples I played earlier, för Knallt i Ninen Talahon and Visa dina tuttar, in both those cases, no original rights holders whose music has been used for training the AI model gets a cut. So if you listen to Visa dina tuttar, it's clear that bands like Vikingarna and Striplers and Sven-Ingvars and a lot of other band in Sweden have been used to train the model. But the money from Spotify is not going in any way to any of them. They're going directly only to the person that have uploaded the track. And this guy, AI Music Dreams, has uploaded, I think it's about 200 of these AI tracks, and has created quite some volume. I haven't counted on it, but I would argue that it's possible. I think that he could start to survive solely by the AI music that he's releasing, a lot of epadunk, etc. So, but no one of the original rights holders get any money from it. Also today, you can register with Tono in Norway or Stim these kinds of songs. You should not do it because all of the societies say that AI music is not copyright protected. But there's no system in place that are tracking it and identifying it. So there's been quite some fraud things going on. The biggest one is in the US, where a guy generated 200,000 AI tracks, uploaded them to the streaming platforms, and also registered them at ASCAP and BMI, which are the equivalents of Tuno in the US, and and made a profit of around $10 million during the years that he had this scheme, and he's now undergoing a judicial process. But that's the second big, and we will come back to these questions moving forward. So the input and the output, copyright, only human creations can be protected by copyright. Well, what is the threshold? What if 50% is created by the machine and 50% by a human? And this is a big, today, the copyright law in most countries only identifies human created works. So it needs to be 100% human, so to speak, to be protected by copyright. There are some exceptions in, for example, the UK law, but otherwise that's the main, only humans get copyright. But what is a human? I think that artificial and human intelligence, everything points towards such a development, are going to merge. So we'll be using AI, artificial intelligence, as a part of our human intelligence without even thinking that we're using artificial intelligence. It's going to be so seamlessly integrated in all our activities. In the long run, it might even be integrated directly in here, but that's science fiction. But in our daily work, it's going to be so integrated that we're not even thinking about that it is AI. So I think it's going to be hard in 10, 15 years to separate what is machine-made and what is human-made, because the machine and humans are so intertwined that you can't separate between them. I think it's going to become a really big creativity boost, but I think this is a very hard problem to solve, and I don't think it's possible with the current copyright scheme. That is not the same as copyright will die. We'll come back to that. The contrary, I think copyright is more important than ever. But for this specific ethical or rights challenge, I think it's going to be hard to separate between what is machine-made and what is human-made. And the fourth that I've chosen, there are other ethical and copyright challenges, but I've chosen these four. The use of others' voices. An artist's voice is not protected by copyright. I think this is important to stress. Your voice is not copyright protected, but rather by personality rights legislation. So in most countries, it is legally possible to use another artist's voice, although rights holders usually respond by sending cease and desist letters. So specifically to DSPs like Spotify and Apple Music, etc., we don't find these tracks, but as you know, they are easily available at TikTok and YouTube. So these are the four I've chosen. Before we come back to this, I would like to introduce this taxonomy that I published in an anthology that was released in 2024. So music production, music business. It's a book released by Mirak. I had one chapter in this anthology where I focused on AI and music, specifically the history. So if you want to dig into the history of how we came to where we are now, that might be a good chapter, and it's available. The book is actually available digitally, free, online, so you can just search for it. Anyhow, I introduced this taxonomy, And first and foremost, and the reason why I wanted to do it is because there are so many misconceptions and misunderstanding on what is what. Everyone is saying, are you using AI? But it's like asking, are you using internet or are you using electricity? AI is kind of ubiquitous around us in many different ways. And I think this is a problem among politicians and so on, that they're not separating between what I think is the most important separation between generative AI and functional AI or problem-solving AI. This part of AI we've had a lot, many years, especially this category. And you've been looking at some of these tools today. This is the newest part. So I also separate between prompt-based generative AI, selection-based generative AI, and catalog-based. And prompt-based, you recognize it. It's these kind of platforms. Actually, Udio is not here because when I wrote this chapter a year ago or something, or no, not a year ago, 1.5 years ago, Udio wasn't released yet. So things have really happened very, very quick. But as you know, prompt-based is basically that you write the instructions, and it gives the music creator a large freedom. You have the freedom to construct whatever you like. And then we have these kinds of platforms, Aiva, Boomindel, Sondro, etc., which are selection-based generative AI platforms. So you choose from criteria like genre and mood and BPM and key and different kinds of stuff. And then there's the platform is generating the music. It's still generative AI, but it's not music. It's usually instrumental music. So production music, background music, and I call it a kind of meta creation. You're just choosing the big categories and then it creates the music, but there's usually no vocals. In here, as you know, many of them also have vocals. And then we have catalog-based generative AI, and this was actually the first category, because already in 2020, OpenAI released OpenAI Jukebox. So 2 years before the ChatGPT was introduced and the AI hype started about 3 years ago, 2 years before that, they released the first true AI model for music, which is called OpenAI Jukebox. And I wrote about it for the music industry already back then, and I was surprised that no one reacted. But I guess the pandemic had just started in the beginning of 2020, so everyone was so focused on that. So it kind of flew under the radar. But this was the first beginnings of generative AI. And so catalog-based generative AI is when you feed a model with a specific catalog. So for example, you feed it with the Michael Jackson catalog, and then you push a button and the model spits out 10 different new songs from Michael Jackson. You can also combine, like I want to combine Michael Jackson catalog with Pearl Jam catalog. Today there are no commercial or I would say simple commercial applications for this. You need some programming skill to make this, but you can search for Michael Jackson AI tracks or Whitney Houston AI songs on YouTube. You can find a whole new list of new releases, and that is almost always based on OpenAI Jukebox, which was released 5 years ago. So this is not so much freedom. I mean, if you train a model on the Michael Jackson catalog, it will make Michael Jackson tracks. And this is quite much freedom, depending on the limitations that the platform has put in place. Now, on this side, you have the problem solving, and one could say that in these cases, all of these could potentially infringe on copyright and have ethical issues. On this side, it's this part that is ethical, but it's not infringing on copyright. But you know, all of these, you've been talking about them the whole day, different kinds of tools, machine learning, and nowadays reinforcement learning, and these kinds of technologies has been used for many years for recommendations, you know, the TikTok feed and the or YouTube Shorts, etc. So but one have to separate between these and these. two totally different ways of using AI. So let us come back to the discussion on these four issues. The input: is training an AI model fair use or not? It is still unclear exactly what applies to platforms focusing on generative AI for music. So I think it's important to mention that this is not decided yet. There are suggestions. The EU AI Act came into force in 24, imposes requirements on licensing and transparency regarding input, so the training of models. Similar legislation has been proposed in the US, but it is still under construction. So if we talk about the AI Act, it's not going to be fully implemented in the EES countries and the EU countries until 26, 27. And they are right now building up the AI office, as it's called, in Brussels, which is going to handle all of this. And so we don't know yet. Companies including OpenAI, Google, Stability AI, Anthropic, and so on, claim that the exception for text and data mining, TDM, it is called in English, exception for text and data mining, applies, which is done in the US called fair use. So this is an exception we have in copyright law for research. So if I want to do research, I can use, 1,000 digitized books if I can extract some data of it that I will use for my research. I can't copy the text, but I can use the text in my research for new knowledge. So this is an exception that we have in copyright law around the world. And this is what these companies are saying. This is research. We're doing research now by training these AI models. So the open web should be fair use. And this is the key issue that will determine how development unfolds in the coming years, whether training an AI model is TDM or not. If the courts decide that it is TDM, that it is fair use, I think all creative industries will need to reform their economy system. It's going to be a huge blow to copyright. I don't think this will happen. I compare this a lot to file sharing and pirate copying in the noughties, and these companies are using the exact same arguments. And most lawyers are quite convinced that those, for example, Suno and Udio, they will get they will fall in their judicial processes, and we will get some prejudicing decisions from the courts. So I think it will not be fair use, but we will have some kind of solutions that will be added upon the existing platforms. Just like, when Tuno was founded, that was because of a new technology. It was radio. And that was a big problem because radio were using music and no one could, and the rights holders didn't get any money from it. That's why Tuno was founded in the beginning. And all these kind of collecting societies is because of a new technology. And I think this will happen also here. Existing organizations will adapt. Time is flying away. So I will go to the output. Should rights holders get a cut from revenues? Yes. This is one of the most important technical challenges to solve moving forward, how to create a system and metadata functions that can identify and await payouts to all included rights holders. We have several proposals: Gen, Vermilio, PEX, Audible Magic. And just a week ago, Udio revealed that they are starting to work with Audible Magic to create a new database where all music created through Udio is identified, usable for actors like Tuno, Spotify, distributor, etc. So we're moving more towards a situation where there's a collaboration between the platforms. When is music machine or human made? I already said what I think about this. I think the distinction is going to be impossible to uphold in the coming decades. When artificial and human intelligence merge, AI becomes a ubiquitous add-on to human thinking and creativity. That does not mean that copyright will die. It will be more important than ever. It just means that a new entity receives copyright for what it is creating. And last, voice cloning. Is it okay to use someone's voice? In the US, we have the No Fake Act. which addresses the whole deepfake issue. Voice cloning in music can and should not be separate from the larger issue of deepfakes in general. Now it's 30 minutes, but I'm just have a few sentences left as a result of the AI development. So I think this is much bigger than just AI cloning in music. This is about the whole deepfake situation. The AI Act involves such legislation, but as I said, it's a couple of years away from being implemented fully. I foresee quite tough legislation on this area and technical solutions which will make it hard to create and publish deepfakes at all. Just like YouTube Content ID can identify content, new systems will identify deepfakes. So these are my takes on these four areas. There are others as well. I've included a whole bunch of new research that addresses these issues. Hopefully we can distribute the slides if you want it. And otherwise you can just email me if you want to get hold of the slides. And thank you for listening.